in this video, I'm going to explain the difference between when your instrument is having a problem and you need to take it into a repair person versus when you are the problem and need to work on your fundamentals. My name is Josh Gu, and I'm taking my years of experience learning, teaching, and performing and sharing all of my best clarinet and music tips so you can get more out of your practice and, most importantly, have fun. You can learn more about all of my many resources at quickstartclarinet.com, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Before we get started, if you want to know the best way to work on your clarinet music and practice fundamentals to grow as a musician, then you should go to quickstartclarinet.com/get-started, where you can join my free members area and get sort of a collection of my very best free resources for you and some of my favorite videos. I have well over 500 YouTube videos now, so watching all of those and sorting through all that information can be quite tedious. In the free members area, things are organized much better, and I've sort of picked the gems that will be the most helpful for you for developing your playing. So check out quickstartclarinet.com/get-started if that sounds interesting to you. Now, one of the things that I come across very frequently in my playing is people saying things like, oh, I think I need to change mouthpieces, or I think there's something wrong with my clarinet because X, Y, or Z isn't coming out well or isn't working well. And in this video, I want to help give you some guidance for when it is actually something that might be wrong with the instrument, and when it's something that means you need to go to quickstartclarinet.com/get-started and develop some better fundamentals. So the fundamental side of things is so important because it's one of those things that you can make really any quality of equipment work as long as it's in good repair. You can make it sound pretty good. Maybe a $200 plastic clarinet and beginner level mouthpiece won't sound quite as good as a $2,000, $5,000, $20,000 professional clarinet with a great professional custom mouthpiece setup and a fantastic reed, etc. But a good player can still make that sort of beginning level student setup still sound pretty good. So even if you are on one of those beginner setups, you should still be able to make it sound pretty darn good and should still be working towards that. And really you only need to go for the high-end upgrades to the professional level instruments when you're looking for just a little bit more finesse and nuance and control and flexibility and depth to sound and things like that, which are all good, but not necessary to sound pretty good on the instrument. So the main thing and kind of the rule of thumb that I always tell my students is if it's a thing that happens sometimes, it's most likely not the instrument, or at least not a serious repair problem. Sometimes if you have very, very slight leaking, things will be maybe 2 to 5% harder to get them to come out, and playing a well-sealing instrument does feel really good for sure, and you should take your clarinet in for repair regularly. But most of the time, if it's something where it's like, ah man, sometimes that note sounds really fuzzy, or sometimes this interval is really challenging, but also sometimes you can get it and it sounds pretty good and works pretty well, then it's probably not the clarinet. It very well may be the reed. Reeds are probably the most variable and the most impactful piece of equipment, which is one of the most frustrating parts of playing a reed instrument. So it very well may be the reed, and if you're just struggling with something in a practice session that you normally don't struggle with, I highly recommend starting by changing the reed or trying a few different reeds and seeing how that feels. And also working on your embouchure, air support, finger position, all of the good clarinet playing fundamental things that you can easily tweak and test and explore and experiment with to see if that may be the problem. Now, on the other hand, when it is a clarinet related problem and an instrument repair issue, it's going to be something that's pretty darn reproducible and pretty darn consistently having that issue. I'm going to demonstrate this, and you can demonstrate this too. I'm going to take I have a little napkin. You can do this with a piece of paper as well. Pretty much anything that's small and not going to damage your pads. And I'm going to take, for example, the side E flat key, which sometimes might develop a leak. I'm going to put the corner of it in there just ever so slightly so that it kind of holds open the pad but doesn't completely cover the tone hole itself. and I'm going to play down a scale, and you'll hear what tends to happen with this little leak happening. Oh, that's weird. Why did that note squeak? That note doesn't normally squeak. Maybe I did something wrong. I'm gonna try it again. Oh, it squeaked again. Let me try just that note. Okay, I'm gonna try getting a little bit more extreme and changing really embouchure and air things and see if I can get that to come out the low note like it should. No matter what I do, it's not coming out. I'm voicing that note as low as possible. I'm making sure that my fingers are covering the holes all the way. That's a really common one. If you think the instrument's leaking, it's probably not the instrument, it's probably your fingers. But I'm doing all of those things and it's still coming out as a squeak very consistently, very reliably. That's a good indicator that you're having something wrong with the instrument. Now, if I make this leak a little bit more noticeable, I'm going to grab my swab, which is a little bit thicker, and is going to hold that key open a little bit more. Then it becomes even more apparent where the leak is. If you're having that where it sounds fine and then you get to a certain point and then suddenly sounds very not fine, then that means you have a major leak and definitely need to take it in to a repair person. When I had just the napkin in there, it was a very small leak and you could barely hear that the sound quality was kind of changing. Once I got to the D and the C, it got a little bit stuffy, a little bit fuzzy, and then we had the big squeak once I got low enough and that leak was in position to be acting as a register key. So that's something that may happen as well. And if you find that the tone is generally stuffy and tends to squeak kind of around a certain note, again, a good sign that you may have a small leak happening. The last thing you can do is kind of test and experiment with it. If I take that napkin again and I'll sort of position it in there the same way that I had it before, where I'm getting that squeak. If you have somebody else, you can kind of try to play that squeak or try playing down to that squeak and test by each time you try holding down one of these side key pads or holding down the other pad. So I know that it's leaking here. I would have to go through and test if I didn't obviously have the napkin showing me where the leak was. But if somebody else was going through, and you could even try doing it yourself too, I'm going to hold that pad down with my thumb and try playing that note. Ah, now it works without holding that key down. Without holding it down, with holding it down, without. And then we get the squeak again. And again, if it's an actual leak, it'll be more apparent where when you're holding it down, it works. When you're not holding it down, it's not working. That's a surefire telltale sign that you definitely have a leak in that particular pad. So you can kind of test it out and go through it and check in with the instrument to see if any leaks are happening. If it's a really bad leak, like I demonstrated with the swab, even pushing it down may not work, but it'll be easy to identify where it is because all the notes above that pad will be fine. Right at that pad, it gets a little weird, and the notes below it don't work at all. So hopefully that gives you some ideas on checking through the instrument. 99.9% of issues are going to be because something is leaking and not sealing all the way, so this will cover you for all of those things. The one last thing I'll say though is it's also very common that a pad will be leaking, not because there's anything wrong with the pad or necessarily wrong with the key adjustments themselves, but it's because you put the instrument together wrong. This most happens with the bridge key. If I get my bridge key really out of alignment, then you can see how this pad wiggles. Even though I'm holding this down, this pad should be closed in this position, but it has a lot of wiggle to it. That means that that pad's not sealing well when I'm doing this. Luckily in this configuration, that's not a problem unless I'm playing the one-on-one B flat or the one-on-one E flat. But if I go the other way, this one's much harder to see, especially on the camera, but there's a little wiggle in this pad, and this pad isn't going down all the way. That one will cause very consistent problems, whereas you're playing down the scale. And again, you heard how it got kind of stuffy right around where that pad wasn't sealing, and then eventually when we got low enough, it squeaked. This one you can test it out kind of if it's a problem by just squeezing a little bit harder as you're playing that, and if that clears it up. So you could hear how as I was squeezing, the note was coming into focus. When I wasn't squeezing, it wasn't in focus and was that stuffy sound. That's a sign that the instrument adjustment is off. And in this case, it was the bridge key, where you can hopefully see that my bridge key is way off center. So when I put that back in center, then it's gonna work just fine. But that bridge key is a really important adjustment in alignment. Sometimes the bridge key will get bent, where even when you have it centered, that pad isn't going all the way down, which again is a good time to go to your local repair person and have them check it out and get that fixed. Now, just to recap, whenever you're having an issue where notes are fuzzy, things aren't coming out, you're getting a very consistent squeak, always start by checking yourself. Make sure that you're playing with a good embouchure, good air support, and your fingers especially are covering the holes all the way. That's 99% of the time. Those are the problems 99-ish% of the time. Yourself, your fingers, your embouchure, your air. Make sure that those are in good shape. Second thing to check is the reed. If you're having kind of a consistent fuzzy sound in places, change your reeds, try a few different reeds, make those personal adjustments, make the reed adjustments. If it's still happening, see if you can then hone in on a specific pad that may be leaking. If when you hold the pad down, that fixes it, it's definitely the instrument and time to see the repair person. If it doesn't seem to be changing anything when you change the pads and stuff, then it's probably a reed thing or a you thing. So hopefully this helps you to narrow in on those things. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, or if you have any great general repair advice to share or general common issues that you've had come up. I'd love to hear about those, and it'll be helpful for other people who are checking out this video as well. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in another one. And last but not least, a huge heartfelt thank you to the Dennersons. This is like the Quick Start Clarinet family who supports the channel and helps to make everything that I do possible. If you would like to support the channel and get some awesome rewards in return, where we can work one-on-one over video and you can have my full support moving forward on your clarinet journey, then go to quickstartclarinet.com/supporter.